Also, another side to which goes far beyond Iran, to your question, which is the notion that, gee, Netanyahu is the problem. We just need to see the back of Netanyahu, and then we go back to a more rational Israel. I think that's a fallacy. That's a fallacy when it comes to Iran. I think it's a fallacy when it comes to Gaza. I think it's a fallacy when it comes to Palestine. You know, Netanyahu may not be someone who is overwhelmingly popular in Israel, and many Israelis would like to see his back and want to see change. But you look at you look at what public opinion is in Israel. You look at what the opposition says, they're going to be less abrasive. But fundamentally, they would be difficult for any government, whether revolutionary or post-revolutionary. Okay. And that's particularly true for the issue of ballistic missiles. Keep in mind that Iran has no air force to be of any worth mentioning. Even if the Russians do supply the S-35 fighter planes for different reasons, but in practice pursuing similar policies, which is you want weak central states.
Yes.
And in terms of Israeli doctrine, it was designed to militarily emasculate your neighbors.
Another edition of National Security Talk. Please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, share all of our videos on Rumble. We'll be going to YouTube soon, so be looking out for that. I'm your host, Brandon Weichert. Follow me at WeTheBrandon on Twitter, X, and Truth Social. And we're joined today by a geopolitical expert, James Dorsey, who has got years of experience studying and analyzing international events. We're going to be really focused today on the Middle East and Iran. Let me just set it up for us real fast. It looks like the Trump administration is appearing to be pro-negotiations with the Iranian regime, even though a week or so ago it looked like they were going to bomb the country. People in the West are asking, is this real, the negotiations? Is this a feint? Meanwhile, the buildup of U.S. military assets and the brinksmanship from Israel toward Iran continues. So at some point, something's going to have to give. And to walk us through all of this, we're joined now by James Dorsey. James, it's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the kind introduction.
Of course, of course. So let's just get into it. What do you think is going to happen here? Do you think these negotiations are real, or do you think this is a ruse? Because my personal opinion is I don't think that the negotiations are real, but feel free to correct me.
Well, let me start by disappointing you in that I'm not going to give you a prediction.
Okay.
Because I think it's the equivalent of putting your finger up in the air and seeing which way the wind blows. But having said that, I think there are a number of factors. First of all, I don't think that either the United States, i.e. Donald Trump, or the Iranians want a military conflagration. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that it will not happen, but it's not their preferred way forward.
Okay.
I also think that, and I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, but having said that, I think he's been consistent in wanting to negotiate. Okay. The problem with the negotiations are severalfold. First of all, Trump wants to negotiate with coercion, bullying, if you wish, intimidation looming large. And if those negotiations don't produce, then he doesn't want a prolonged military conflict. He wants a quick good optics operation, and they believes that then will resolve the issue or persuade the other party to come to the table. Now, to a degree, you can argue that has happened in Venezuela. at least so far. But Venezuela is not Iran, or Iran is not Venezuela. That's one. Both sides, the United States and the Iranians, have solid, legitimate reasons to distrust each other, which complicates negotiations. On top of that, Trump's negotiating approach to negotiations is essentially, this is what you're going to do. And if you don't do it, this is what's going to happen, and it's bad. Yeah. It's been bad for Iranians for the last 40-something years, since the Iranian Revolution, and they've proven to be very resilient. That's not to say that they're in worse shape than they have been perhaps in the history of the Islamic Republic, but nonetheless. But there's also another issue here. And the issue is that is several-fold. One is that some of the demands that the Trump administration is putting forward are not just demands that would be difficult for the current government. They would be difficult for any government, whether revolutionary or post-revolutionary. Okay. And that's particularly true for the issue of ballistic missiles. Keep in mind that Iran has no air force to be of any worth mentioning. Even if the Russians do supply the S-35 fighter planes, it's still no match for regional air forces in the Gulf or Israel, or let alone for the United States. They have no navy to be worth mentioning. So ballistic missiles is the core of their conventional defense and deterrence.
And it's an impressive arsenal they've built for themselves.
It's an impressive arsenal. Yeah. Look, they've done very well given sanctions. Right. Let's face it. They've been innovative. Yeah. But that's the core of their defense. Particularly given that whatever conflagration you will have, even if it's a regional conflagration, is going to be largely air and naval. It's not going to be land. I mean, sure, if the war, and we can talk about this later, if the war were to expand and expand not only to Israel and the Gulf, but also northwards to Turkey and the Caucasus, Azerbaijan, then potentially you could see land confrontations too. But as a matter of principle, it would be a land and an air and naval assault. So those missiles are crucial for all practical purposes. You take those missiles away, or you severely curtail their missile capability, Iran's naked. And no Iranian government is going to settle for that.
No, and this is something that I've said to people at Mar-a-Lago that I know.
So to come back to your question, I think the negotiations are serious.
Okay.
But I also think that there are red lines. It's clearer what those red lines are for Iran, and less clear what those red lines really are for the United States. Let me add something, a complicating factor, if I may, which is the Gulf states do not want to see a military intervention in Iran.
Yes.
But their concerns are different from those of the United States. Going back more than a decade to the negotiations for the 2015 international agreement that curbed Iran's nuclear program, the Gulf states wanted to see ballistic missiles discussed. They wanted to see Iran's non-state allies in various Arab countries discussed. They were less concerned about nuclear. They're now more interested in nuclear, not because nuclear has become more important or a greater concern to the Gulf states, but because that may be the key to lowering the tensions. On the nuclear issue, by as a matter of principle, there's more leeway for a compromise than there is on
The ballistic
on the nuclear on the other issues. And the last thing I'll say on this is that if you look at where the emphasis has been in Iran on military development and reconstruction, if you wish, military reconstruction after the Israeli assault, the 12-day Israeli campaign against Iran in June of last year, and the US bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities, the emphasis is on restoring missile facilities, restoring air defense, rather than nuclear.
Yeah. And I think James, because I agree with you. I think the ballistic missile, in fact, in my book on Iran, I said the ballistic missile issue is the big one. But I think many people who aren't in this world that you and I are in might be kind of surprised to hear the nuclear issue is not the primary issue here. And I think people need to understand, and you know, if you could elaborate on this, how advanced is the Iranian nuclear weapons program? You know, the Israelis every year say they're 6 months away from getting complete nuclear weapons capability. And at one time I used to think that too, but I'm looking at it and now I'm sort of going, I don't know. I'm surprised they haven't broken out based on what the Israelis have been claiming. Is the Iranian nuclear weapons capability not as advanced as what some parties want us to believe?
Let's take a step back.
Okay.
Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, has for a very long time been pushing the nuclear issue. Now, obviously, Israel is concerned about any nuclear power in the Middle East. Certainly a power that's hostile to it, and that's a legitimate concern, even though Israel's somewhat deceptive about all of this because it is a nuclear power, even though it doesn't declare itself as such. Raising the nuclear issue was, on the one hand, a legitimate concern, but it was also opportunistic because Israel needed an enemy, but it was basically saying the Palestinians are no longer the issue. It's Iran. That's the existential. Palestinians don't pose an existential threat to Israel.
Okay.
Iran does, and they've overstated, I think, repeatedly and consistently the threat of the Iranian nuclear program. From Iran's perspective, sure, they've always been denying that that they had any ambition to become a nuclear power. They probably wanted that option. I don't think that they necessarily wanted to have a weapon ready to fire, but they wanted that option. Again, from the Iranian perspective, it's a country that's been under siege for almost half a century, for all practical purposes. It's a country that views itself as surrounded by hostile forces, whether state or non-state, and particularly the Americans. And the Americans, for all practical purposes, have talked about regime change on and off for a very long time. And they have supported ethnic groups, whether that's the Kurds, whether that's the Baloch. And so, you know, again, the Iranian position is rational, if you wish. Having said all of that, let's be clear about it. They negotiated the 2015 agreement. They abided by it. You know, they stuck to it. And if you look at what happened when Trump withdrew from the agreement in 2018, it took the Iranians a year to start violating the agreement. and they were hoping in that year that their abiding by the agreement while threatening to violate it would persuade the United States to come back to the table. It didn't happen. And so you can interpret the enrichment of whatever it is, 400 or 400 plus kilograms of uranium to 60%, gradually enhancing it, as this is wanting to have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
Or you can interpret it as the Iranians were using this as leverage in the hope that it would, that the United States and others would say, ho, ho, we need to do something. We need to have an agreement so that this doesn't proceed.
And that all makes very much sense. And I will admit, when I worked in government, I very much I'm still somewhat hesitant given the bad history between the United States and the regime in Iran, the government in Iran. When I worked in government, that I just assumed that Iran was this unstable, crazy, this is what we were all told to think, right? But since leaving government, I still don't think we can trust Iran. But ultimately, it does seem very odd, their willingness for being so crazy to constantly try to negotiate, even after being attacked. So this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I think a lot of Americans, I think, are not understanding that there's a subtext here. And personally, I'm starting to think it is possible, if it was just Trump, Witkoff, and Kushner meeting with the Iranians, they probably could get a deal. Certainly, it sounds like, as you noted, the Arab countries very much prefer a deal to war. But it seems like the Israeli factor is the complicating issue here. Can Israel ever accept a negotiated settlement? Or should I say, can Netanyahu ever accept a negotiated settlement? Or are we in a position where, as long as Netanyahu's in power, there's always going to be this potential of war?
Well, I think there's several elements here. One is that, let's face it, you have countries like Iran, or Qatar for that matter, that evoke immediate response. Everybody has an opinion about it. And a lot of it is biased, uninformed opinion about it.
Yes.
Whether that's the product of Israeli information wars that have been very effective, that may be too, that is part of it, but maybe too easy an explanation. There's history on both sides. There's the 1953 coup, in which the U.S. has been involved, and that's something that is deeply engraved in Iran's DNA. This is a revolutionary regime that uses very stark, very aggressive language. You have the history of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, the occupation of the embassy for 444 days. So Iran does this now. The rhetoric may serve domestic purposes. It may serve in terms of appealing to various non-Iranian audiences. It's not the kind of rhetoric that's going to endear Iranians to the United States. And of course, you've had, it's not been consistent, but you've had, for example, when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was president, you had the Holocaust denial conferences, and all of that, which, is poor theatrics at the very least.
Unfortunately, we're having similar theatrics here in the United States presently. So
absolutely. But there's also another side to which goes far beyond Iran, to your question, which is the notion that, gee, Netanyahu is the problem. We just need to see the back of Netanyahu, and then we go back to a more rational Israel. I think that's a fallacy.
Okay.
That's a fallacy when it comes to Iran. I think it's a fallacy when it comes to Gaza.
Okay.
I think it's a fallacy when it comes to Palestine. Netanyahu may not be someone who is overwhelmingly popular in Israel. And many Israelis would like to see his back and want to see change. But you look at you look at what public opinion is in Israel. You look at what the opposition says, they're going to be less abrasive. But fundamentally,
there's alignment.
The differences are not that stark. And the last thing I'll say on this, keep in mind, Israeli settlement of the West Bank started with the Labour Party.
That's right. Yeah.
It did not start with Menachem Begin.
That's right.
And the Likud. Yeah. Now they've expanded it. They've been more aggressive about it, and so on and so forth. But this is, it's the cross-party lines, cross-ideological lines in Israel are paint a picture of much greater I don't want to use the word unanimity, but
consensus,
essential agreement on the fundamentals.
Yeah, and I think you're probably right about that. It is very interesting to observe, in my opinion, Netanyahu, because I've been critical of him, but I've said in the past, I'm not sure if he is the only problem, because it seems like there is a consensus there. And it's interesting, you say, the Iranians feel like they're surrounded, and they do. The Israelis say the same things about themselves. Oh, we're surrounded, so it's very interesting, these sort of, they're very opposite camps, and yet they're saying similar things about their strategic situation.
With one difference.
Yeah.
I mean, that was true for Israel until the late 1980s.
Yes.
Early 1990s. That changed with three things. A peace treaty with Egypt.
Yep.
A peace treaty with Jordan. And an Arab peace plan endorsed by the Arab League, by all Arab states, that called for basically a land for peace deal. With other words, Israeli withdrawal from territories occupied in 1967 during the Middle East War, and in return for that, Arab recognition of Israel. That's no longer a surrounded state.
I agree. Yeah.
Now, sure, you had Hezbollah. You had what the Americans manufactured in Iraq. You have the Houthis.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, none of those are existential threats.
Well, and let's face it, they have the superpower.
I mean, they're threats.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're not threats.
Right.
But the last thing I'll say in this, sure, I mean, this regime, or the government in Iran, has Palestine written in its core. But there's also a subtext to it. The Iranians have always said they would accept whatever the Palestinians accept. And if you go back, I believe it was the Arab Islamic Summit in Riyadh in 2023, so roughly a month into the Gaza war. The Iranians, although they initially objected, they signed on to a statement by all states represented there, calling for a two-state solution. in to the Palestinian problem.
Interesting. Interesting.
So what I'm and look, I was in Tehran from living there from 1978 to 1981.
Mm-hmm.
So I experienced I saw the revolution and covered it, and I remember Arafat being the first of the first foreign leader to set foot
Mm-hmm.
in Tehran, at a moment that he had just started the process, which was a torturous process of moving from what he called at the time a secular democratic state, which was a one-state solution to the Palestinian issue, to a two-state solution involving recognition of Israel, disavowal of violence, and so on.
Interesting. So, in a way, and I really hate the concept of linkage, which I think is overused in DC when it comes to the Middle East. But in a way, I mean, it does sound like the path to possible peace with Iran might actually lay in making a deal between Israel and the Palestinians. Is that fair to say, or is that an overstatement?
It's one factor, and perhaps an important factor.
Okay.
So, more broadly, if you had a resolution of the Palestinian issue, that is an issue, that is a resolution that both Palestinians and Israelis can agree to, rather than a sort of board of peace and foreign foreign tutelage. But if one that was genuinely a resolution, it would not only ease things with Iran, it would ease things across the board.
Yeah.
I mean,
this is what Bin Laden told us in the 90s. I mean, this was a big issue of his. So
absolutely, but okay, but Bin Laden would not have accepted a two-state solution.
I agree. I'm just saying this has been an issue. Yeah,
and he would have turned against those that would have accepted such a solution. But the Saudis, the Qataris, the other Gulf states, the Lebanese, the Syrians being a somewhat different issue because of the Golan Heights,
right? Which
is a Syrian, not a Palestinian problem.
Yeah,
but clearly, if there were a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian issue, that would change things. Now, the caveat on that is, with Iran, it wouldn't change the ballistic missile issue.
Right, of course.
But it could change, for example, the issue of Iran's relations with non-state actors like Hezbollah, because if you had an Israeli-Palestinian agreement, Hezbollah's rationale for opposing disarmament would no longer be an argument. Now, would that to be true for the Houthis, whose rhetorical animosity is against Jews as much as it is against Israel as such, is a different question. But as a matter of principle, it would have consequences for the Houthis too. So in that sense, yes, an Israeli-Palestinian solution, not just a Gaza solution,
right,
but one that also includes resolving the issue of
West Bank,
of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. That would be a paradigm shift in the region.
And this is the great sort of diplomatic white whale, is we've always hunted trying to get that deal, and it keeps eluding us. But I agree. I think that we would need to address that, and that's interesting because it's another thing I didn't think we needed to do, but it's very obvious the last few years that this is a key sticking point. Now, my question, though, related to that, Iran is predominantly Shiite Islamic faith ethnic Persian. Well, they've got other ethnicities as well, but they're not Arab. But the Palestinians are Sunni for the most part, Muslim Arabs. So, and we've always been, and there is a divide there between those two camps. But is Iran truly supportive of the Palestinian cause because of a religious issue, or is it because they're using it as a cudgel against their Israeli foes?
Look, absolutely there are divisions between Shiites and Sunnis.
Yeah.
And there's been in Arab states in some severe discrimination of Shiites.
Yeah.
But I also think that the Sunni-Shiite divide is overstated.
Yes. This is Valley Nasser's thesis from many years ago, was the Sunni.
Right. I think it's overstated. And let's keep in mind that the Palestinian issue is an issue across the Muslim world. You can argue they haven't really, all they've done is rhetorical, they've sold them down the line, whatever you want to argue. But certainly in public opinion, it's an issue that's very much alive, and governments have to take that into account.
Yeah.
And that's partly why Saudi Arabia has hardened its position on recognition of Israel.
Yeah,
and Mohammed bin Salman is someone who keeps very close tabs on public opinion.
Yes, he does.
He has his own.
He's very
he has his own. He has his own polling. He knows that that would be one step too far.
Yep.
So that's one thing. Iran specific, it's a revolutionary regime. Yeah. Now, it's a revolutionary regime run by old men who need to keep up a revolutionary facade. But nonetheless, the Palestinian issue was central to their ideology, to their foreign policy from day one. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's genuine, and it has nothing to do with Sunni Shia. Keep in mind when Hamas broke with Iran a decade ago.
Yep.
And walked out of Damascus.
Yep.
That had nothing to do with religious divides.
Yeah.
It had to do with the way Bashar al-Assad was handling the popular revolt in the country.
Yeah. 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 And I have that in my book on Iran, was that incident of the breakdown. So, and I will just tell you, I spoke with, he's probably dead now. He was very old, about a decade ago, a IRGC, one of the founding members. He was with the Grand Ayatollah in Paris, went down to Iran, was part of the entourage. Now he's a dissident.
Do you remember who it was?
He's bald. I can see his face. This is my problem. I'm better with faces and not names.
And I know the problem.
Yeah, right. So, but I was a graduate student at the time, and my professor was Joshua Moravchik. Excuse me. Right. And he brought him in to guest lecture. It was fascinating because what he did was he basically broke down the sort of governing structure of the Islamic Republic, of the revolutionary regime, as he called it. And he pointed out that, at least when he was involved, it was modeled very similar to how Lenin modeled the Bolsheviks. And he was drawing similarities to the revolutionary nature. And he said that Americans tend to forget that this is a revolutionary regime to its core. And he said, this is, I think, one of the stumbling blocks, is we don't understand that. So I was just fascinated when you brought it up again, because
although there's another.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the founding of the IRGC.
Yeah.
And the new government in '79 had every reason to distrust the military.
Yeah.
And to create an alternative structure. There was a dinner that I attended on New Year's Eve, December 31, 1978. So 6 weeks before the the revolution 2 weeks before the Shah left.
Mm-hmm.
And four of the people at that dinner was Nasiri, the head of Sabak, the Iranian Secret Service, intelligence service.
Mm-hmm.
Two martial law commanders, one from Isfahan, one from Tehran, and the commander of the air wing of the Iranian army, General Khosrodat. The dinner was hosted by Zahir Zahedi, who was the Shah's son-in-law and the an acclaimed ambassador to Washington, famous for his parties and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And these were the hardliners.
Yeah.
These were the guys who wanted to crush the revolt at whatever stage.
Yeah.
And if you go back to February 12, 1979, which was the day of the revolt, I was standing on a rooftop, and below me were millions of Iranians defying curfew.
Okay.
And above me were Khosrodad's helicopter gunships.
Wow.
And you knew at that moment, you either pave the streets with thousands of corpses, or this is over.
Yeah.
And Khosrodad was waiting for the Shah's go-ahead, and he never got it. The other element from that time that I think speaks to what you were just saying is Mehdi Barzaghan, who was the prime minister immediately after the appointed by Khomeini, whom I actually met several times. He and his son-in-law, Hussein Bani Asadi, were feverishly working on trying to define what an Islamic Republic meant. You know, at that point, there was no consensus on it. There was no clear blueprint from what they wanted to achieve. Granted, both Mehdi and Hussein were sort of more. They weren't secular, but more. They were less religiously driven, if you wish.
Yeah.
And they belonged to a wide group of people who were not necessarily supporters of Khomeini and his ideology, but believed that the clerics would need them to run government.
Yeah.
And obviously found out that the clerics didn't need them.
Yeah.
But so a lot of those days was really trying to figure out, well, how are we going to structure this? And at the same time, needing to build structures that shielded them against forces in the country that may try to prevent them from solidifying their grip on power, including the military.
Yeah, and I'd like to kind of go back in time right now, because the history of the revolution in '79 was a component of my book. I spoke with people like Greg Copley. I don't know if you know him, who was involved.
I know who he is. I don't know him.
Yeah. Excuse me. And he put me in touch with a lot of people that he knew that were still around. This was 6 years ago when I wrote the book, so they're probably dead now. They were very old. But so he gave me some insights on some things that were going on. One of the things that I found fascinating was that it sounds like the Carter administration, and feel free if you disagree, just tell me. I mean, it's not a big deal. I'm just very curious. But what I found is that there was a U.S. ambassador on the ground, William Sullivan, who it sounds like was trying to get the Carter administration to support removing the Shah and replacing him with the Grand Ayatollah and the clerics. Have you heard this? Do you know anything about this?
I know the theory.
Okay. You don't agree with that?
I think it was much more complex.
Okay.
First of all, there were various periods
Uh-huh.
in the Sullivan administration of the U.S. Embassy.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
A lot of the reporting that came out of the embassy was actually very accurate.
Okay. Okay.
And if you go back and you read the multiple volumes, I think it's 19 volumes, but don't hold me to that, of embassy documents that were published by the Iranians after the occupation of the U.S. Embassy in November 1979, it's clear that there was an understanding of what was going on. And it's clear that what happened is that you would get some solid reporting on the ground from the embassy, that once it hit the political level, so the level of the political appointees within the State Department, within the administration, it was ignored because it didn't fit
the narrative,
whatever policy, ideology, whatever it may be. That's one part of it. I mean, you had people and like Mike Matrinko, who was the U.S. Consul General in Tabriz, later became Consul General in Krakow in Poland, and was also served in Israel. Michael, I mean, he's now retired, but he was, together with Bill Royce of VOA, the top Farsi speakers of the administration at the time. And Michael was not someone who stayed in his office. Michael was someone who was very well connected. I mean, when he was in Krakow, Iranians would come to Krakow for their visas to the U.S. because Michael was there.
Interesting.
And his reporting was, very clear on where things were going. Now, he at times struggled with Sullivan to get those cables sent out. I mean, I'm reading into this but I don't know this for a fact, but that Sullivan was more inclined to try and keep the Shah in power.
Okay, because but
that's my reading. Sullivan has never said that to me. It is a bit
murky. So in my research, the reason I brought it up, because I was never satisfied with how I concluded it in the book, because it almost seemed like Sullivan was of two minds. So he comes in and he's briefing Brzezinski, and he's sending these cables like, we need to talk to the Ayatollah, we need to talk to the clerics and figure out how we integrate them. And then there are cables where he does sound like he's trying to defend the Shah.
Right.
And I think it was, as I described in the book, I think it was a larger problem of the Carter administration, where they couldn't make up their mind what they wanted to do. And, right. I mean, because for instance, I found Carter did write these flowery love letters to the Ayatollah when he was in Paris.
And there was also his statement. I mean, don't forget his statement on when he was in Tehran on the eve of the revolution, 31 December.
The Sea of Stability, or the Island of Stability. It was Island of Stability speech.
Something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was definitely a back and forth.
Just as a between brackets, I don't know if you've read it, but if not, you should. Scott Anderson's last book called King of Kings.
Yes, I started reading it. I haven't had a chance to finish it, but Scott Anderson is probably the expert that I follow for a lot of the history.
He addresses a lot of these issues with Sullivan.
Okay.
And whatever.
I'm going to have to definitely finish it then, because, like I said, I didn't focus on Sullivan, but I certainly looked at Sullivan. And he had a very interesting background during the Vietnam War, when he was overseeing what was going on in Cambodia and Laos. And there was a lot of negative things said about him there. So I took a more negative sort of view on him in Iran. But it is very murky. And I even admitted this in the book. I was very frustrated with that angle of so I'll have to see Scott's book, because I'm sure he did a better job of clarifying it. But there did seem to be an odd attraction between Carter and the Ayatollah that's been widely underreported. And again, feel free to correct me, but at one point, Carter did say he felt he could work with, he felt because he was a Southern Baptist, he could work better with a fellow believer like the Grand Ayatollah in resisting communism. And it sounded like the British government agreed with that, because the Brits stayed in Iran until 81, 82, helping to, do whatever they were doing, selling weapons and whatnot. Was this the belief among Western leaders that they could?
No, I don't think it was. I wouldn't formulate it that way. I mean, I've no doubt. My impressions from Carter, and I've met him a couple of times. That he would have believed that sort of connection of religiosity, and ethics that go with that would have allowed him to build a rapport with Khomeini.
Yeah,
I doubt that would have been possible.
I agree.
But I also think that it was a perfectly realistic position to try and build some bridge with Khomeini, given that, first of all, he was clearly a very popular leader. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was able to bring millions out in the streets, even if he wasn't in the country. Mm-hmm. And sure, he had an infrastructure in the way that Reza Pahlavi doesn't have, through the mosques, through the charities, and so on. But nonetheless, I mean, he was a major player, and yes, you want to have some sort of relationship with him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, given how important a country like Iran is.
Yeah.
Iran is going to be long-term, maybe not a regional hegemon, but it's going to be one of probably three countries that are going to dominate the Middle East. Look, this is a country. Let's keep in mind it's a huge population, mm-hmm. whatever it is, 80 million, an enormous history of empire, going back thousands of years, a battle-hardened military, and sure, whatever devastated shape it is in, it has an industrial base.
Yeah,
it's resource-rich. Mm-hmm. It has crucial geography, and it has a very educated population. Yeah. I mean, there are not many countries in the Middle East that can boast
Afghanistan.
That.
It's not Afghanistan.
It's not Afghanistan. It's not the Gulf.
That's right.
It's not Lebanon. It's not Syria.
Yeah.
I mean, potentially Turkey or Egypt would if they get their acts together, would have many of those qualities. Yeah. Maybe not all. They may not have the resources in the way that Iran has them.
Well, Turkey is doing some interesting things with their defense industry.
But these are countries that have many of those attributes that you need to be a regional power.
Yeah, I agree.
A sustainable regional power.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you want to have some relationship with whatever government is in place in a country like that is, to me, perfectly rational.
Yeah.
And that doesn't have to do with love for that's where you get into all the ideological stuff and the information wars and whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think it has anything to do with love for the Ayatollah. I think it has to do with
national interest,
hard realpolitik.
Yeah. Okay, so this I had a couple other questions. I do actually want to ask you one other question about history, because it's one that's fascinating to me. There has been a rumor persistent in the region. Forbes touched on this back in 2020. A guy named Melik Kayan, I think, is the writer. And I've heard it from multiple people that I talked to for writing my book. There is a persistent rumor that the Grand Ayatollah, his father, was actually a famous British expatriate, that he was not actually Persian, 100% Persian. Have you heard this? Is there any?
I've heard it. I've heard it. To be honest, I haven't looked at it in detail.
Okay. I was
doubt it.
Okay.
I doubt it, but I don't. It's not doubt based on research
I was fascinated by it.
What I would determine to be a fact.
Okay.
But I look. It's the same. I mean, you had to go back decades. You had similar rumors about Arafat.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's right. The Romanian intelligence operative claimed that he basically created Arafat. That for the Soviets. Right. There's an entire book
so
on that.
And which has proven to be false.
Okay, it has. I see. I didn't pay attention enough to look in beyond what I heard. Okay,
but so I don't give it a lot of credence.
Okay.
Nor do I give it. First of all, and so even if that were true, so what?
Certainly, but yeah,
Khomeini is who Khomeini is.
Absolutely, I just thought it was interesting,
irrespective of who his parents are.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just thought it was very fascinating because of the British role in the region.
Right.
That's always fascinated me, just sort of as a curiosity. That's why I brought it up.
Right, but I would doubt it.
And one other thing, you brought up the 1953 coup, and then we'll transition to the last part, which is I want to talk a little bit about the more geopolitical situation in the region. But, in the 1953 coup, you had, the U.S. CIA was heavily involved, MI6 was heavily involved, but it was the generals of the Shah who initiated it, wasn't it? Because they were upset that Mossadegh basically kicked the king from his perch atop the constitutional monarchy. And it wasn't it the Islamists, or not Islamists, wasn't it the clerics in the country who were actually on board with returning the Shah in the 50s rather than deal with Mossadegh because they thought he was a communist or an unbeliever? Yeah. Is that not right, or is there some merit to that, or?
I think it's more complex.
Okay.
I mean, my reading is yes, there was opposition to Mossadegh. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And Mossadegh, I don't think he was a communist.
I don't either. I don't either.
In that sense, he was a nationalist.
Yeah.
Without question. He made mistakes. There's no doubt about that. And he was a threat to the current regime.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, yes, there were generals that wanted that.
Mm-hmm.
But my reading is that at the end of the day, in fact, you had 2 coup attempts at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The first one failed, and the second one would not have happened without the Americans and the Brits.
Okay.
So there's a partial truth to that, but it's in my mind just more complicated and more intricate.
Okay, because another thing that was fascinating was many of the same people, younger obviously, who led the 79 revolution for the clerics were actually on the ground supporting the Shah against Mossadegh in the 53 coup, which is always very fascinating to me because of how we are told the 53 coup is so integral to understanding the current moment in Iran today. And I always thought that was interesting because, I don't know.
But part of the opposition to first of all, the opposition to the Shah was and the revolution itself, and this was a revolution.
Yeah.
If you had probably 2 revolutions in the 20th century that were popular revolutions that succeeded, that was the Russians and the Iranians.
Yep, no doubt.
This was genuine.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. Part of the problem was that the modernization policies of the Shah
in the 60s,
and the 70s, for that matter, were imposed.
Yeah. like the
you know,
czars, like the czars
there are people who will argue that, and there's some truth to that, that Khomeini brought women back into public life.
Really?
You know, so many women, because of the banning of the chador by the Shah, stayed at home.
Mm.
And suddenly, you know, you saw these
very
mass protests against the Shah in the run-up to the revolution, these blocks of women dressed in chadors. They wouldn't have been out in the streets without
I didn't
that.
know any of that. That's amazing.
And so that's one part of the puzzle. There was also the repression.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to put percentages on this.
Okay.
There's no doubt in my mind that there was a significant pious part of the religious part of the population that was partly religiously motivated in opposing the Shah, in part because of the reasons that I just cited. But there was also a very significant portion of the population, and again, I'm not saying they were more or less than the religious. I have no idea. But there was a significant portion of the population that basically rode on the coattails of the religious revolutionaries to get rid of the Shah. The Shah, you know, Khomeini had the infrastructure for it. He had the leadership qualities. You know, he had a sixth sense of what public opinion was.
He had legitimacy.
Yeah, he had legitimacy and he had authority. There was no other leader that had that.
Yeah,
as a matter of principle.
And it was interesting.
And so you had what I was mentioning earlier. You had a lot of people who felt that once the Shah had been toppled, they would be in positions of power. Because they knew how to run a government, not these bearded turbaned clerics. And that's where they miscalculated.
And I was going to say, it's interesting because, and in the streets, my understanding is that as the 79 revolution is underway, you've got the Islamic revolutionaries partnered nominally with the Fedayeen Khalq, which was sort of this Marxist revolutionary group, and they were sort of helping each other out.
Absolutely.
So it's sort of an odd red-green axis there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, so this was a broad coalition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without
very
question.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the fear in D.C. at the time, and I don't mean to keep harping on history, but I'm fascinated by that, and I think you have to understand the history to understand where we are today.
Absolutely.
Now, the fear in D.C. at the time, people like Wolfowitz, who was working for the Carter administration in the Pentagon, or I think State Department or Pentagon, the fear was
he was Deputy Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So yeah. And
I thought he was under Reagan.
No, well, I believe if my history is correct about Wolfie, he was a neocon in Carter's administration, and Reagan kept him on, and then of course he came back under George W., and we all know the disasters that followed. But Wolfowitz wrote a paper as the Shah fell in 79, warning that we would need to have a contingency plan to deploy thousands of U.S. Army airborne Rangers into the mountains of Iran because the Soviets were then going to try to come in. Now, Steve Cole mentions this in his history of the wars in Afghanistan. There was this belief that the Soviets were going to first take Afghanistan and then move into Iran. Were those fears at all based in reality, or was this just sort of more of the wilderness of mirrors that our people in DC tend to fall into?
I think the answer is yo.
Okay. Okay.
With other words, there's always been the theory that the Soviet Union wanted a deep seaport in the south.
Yeah.
And that much of their policy in the region was driven by that.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was an ambition.
Okay.
To what degree it was a driver is a different question.
Okay.
Now, having said that, certainly from the Iranian position, and go back again to the late 70s, early 80s, the slogan of the Islamic revolutionaries was "No, not West and not East."
Yeah. Yeah.
And not East was talking about the Soviet Union.
Soviets. Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a good reason for that.
Mhm.
The Russians had occupied parts of Iran
Yep.
during World War II and before. And so they had good reason to be concerned about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's just something that I know it informed a lot of our policies after the Shah fell, was this theory that the Russians, and I've spoken to Russians who were, around back in the Afghan war, and they have said that was never the plan, that basically the Soviet government was panicking because their client was collapsing in Kabul, and it was really never about breaking out beyond Afghanistan. It was just about securing that flank.
I was in Afghanistan when the Russians marched in.
Okay, I did not know that. That's very cool.
I was expelled. I was expelled about a month to 6 weeks later.
Okay, that's very interesting. I'll have to have you back eventually, and I'd love to just spend. Okay, so in the last,
but the point I was trying to make is, one point I'm trying to make is, one could possibly argue that when the Carter administration tried to build bridges with Khomeini, that was the Russian issue was a card they could have capitalized on and may not have done so to the degree. I mean, this is theory, okay?
Yeah.
But I think one could make that argument.
Okay.
Because sure, the United States was great Satan, and it was great Satan because of its support for the Shah, and its involvement in the 1953 coup. But and Britain was little Satan, but so was Russia in a sense.
Isn't that interesting?
or the Soviet Union at the time.
And I do know that one of the reasons, this is what I was told, one of the reasons the British actually stayed longer with Khomeini's new government was because they were actually helping to identify communist agents in Iran, and that there was sort of this quiet cooperation going on between British intelligence and
to be fair, Russian intelligence was active.
Absolutely, there's no doubt.
I mean, I was talking to Russians, of which I have no doubt that these were intelligence operatives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
it was the Cold War, right? I mean, hey, that's
well, it was. But not only was it the Cold War. Again, Iran is an important country.
Mm-hmm.
It's a major Muslim state.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of, if you want to call it that, the larger soft underbelly.
Yep.
Of the Soviet Union.
Yes.
They had every
Russia.
Right. They had every reason to have an interest.
Yeah. That's very good. Yeah. What I really want to know is whether or not this negotiation works. I'm hopeful that we can avoid a war. I don't think America can afford another Middle East war. But with Trump, who knows? It's sort of like throwing the dice, because he's still building up in the region. So let's just, for a moment of speculation, say Trump did decide to pull the trigger. What would Russia do? Because Russia is very close with the current government of Iran. They're flooding them with weapons and all kinds of diplomatic support, intelligence support. What more would they do if it did look like the regime was going to be taken down by the United States?
I don't look. First of all, sure, the Russians have good relations with the Iranians. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's two peas on a pod.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah.
Their differences too. Mm-hmm. That's one. Obviously, the Russians, and like the Chinese, and again, they're not two peas on a pod, would like to see this regime survive. Yeah. If only it may not really be the regime that they would prefer, but just because they don't want the United States to succeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's limited. They're not going to intervene militarily on behalf of this government. Okay. I mean, they've got a war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
They've got a plate full. And if they were to want to expand their war, it would not be with regard to Iran. Again, that would be taking on the U.S. military.
Yeah.
Which would have consequences for their war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So that's not a road they're going to travel down. Sure, they may sell them aircraft. They may be politically supportive. They may even try and help them financially. But that's as far as it's going to go.
Okay.
And the same is true for China.
I was just going to ask, because 14%
and let's face it, China, even more than Russia, has pushed the envelope in terms of its relationships with Iran versus its relationships with the United States. But it's been very careful not to cross a red line.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
At the end of the day, the U.S. or the U.S. positions shape Chinese attitudes towards Iran and what they will and will not do.
So even if they lose 14 to 15% of their oil, which comes from Iran, the Chinese, you think, would still not do really much of anything?
They can compensate for that
by going to Russia for more,
or the Gulf.
Okay. Now, if the Iranians shut down the Strait of Hormuz, they would not be able to get it from the Gulf for a period of time.
That's true, but again, then they're shutting off their own oil exports. I mean, I'm not saying that they won't do it.
Yeah.
I suspect that it would be more the Houthis and the Iranians that do it.
Interesting.
You would see renewed attacks. If the Americans attacked Iran, you could very well see Houthi attacks on not necessarily because the Iranians asked them to.
Yeah.
I mean, keep in mind that Iran's relationships with its non-state allies are not Simon Says.
Yes.
These are independent actors.
Yeah.
Let's take another example. If the United States were to attack Iran, I would question whether Hezbollah will retaliate.
They did the first time.
Israel has been violating the ceasefire with Lebanon since it was concluded in November of last year. And sure, Hezbollah has been significantly degraded, but it's not incapable. Hezbollah has not responded.
Right.
And not because it couldn't respond,
it didn't want
at least militarily, but because of domestic Lebanese concerns, and because they don't want another real conflagration with Israel at this point.
That's so interesting. Because, of course, the Israelis say the opposite. They say
even if the Iranians were to go to Hezbollah, it's not clear. It's not, for me, 1 and 1 is 2, that Hezbollah then fires up its missiles.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, so we've talked about the two bigs from outside the region, China and Russia. You mentioned the prospect of 3 potential sort of regional powers taking primacy. What would that be? Iran, Israel, and Turkey, or would it be Iran, Israel, and Saudi Arabia?
No, Iran, Egypt, and Turkey.
Iran, Egypt, and Turkey. Okay. So Israel's not even
no, I wouldn't discount Israel in this.
Okay.
Look, Israel's a state, period.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
It is, if you were to get a conflagration between Israel and Turkey, that would be interesting to see how that works out.
It would.
But
Yeah.
Beyond, outside of Turkey, which is the second largest standing military in NATO, and again battle hardened.
Yes.
Outside of Turkey, Israel is the foremost military force.
Undoubtedly.
And it's not a question of simply comparing how many planes do you have,
right,
or how many ships do you have, or how many soldiers do you have. It's just simply, this is a very capable military.
Yeah.
And a ruthless military.
Very ruthless.
Let's face it. And so it's a military power. It's also a technological power.
Yes.
It's a major technological power in a way that no other Middle Eastern state is.
Yeah.
And it's a nuclear power.
Yep. Yep.
So in that sense, it's probably 4 states, not 3.
Yeah.
If you wish.
Yeah.
But I think the point is, Turkey, Egypt share the assets that Iran has, huge populations, domestic markets, geography, battle-hardened militaries, deeply ingrained identity as empires going back thousands of years, educated populations. So those are many of those assets are not assets that the Gulf states have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in the long term, I think that and you're already in some ways seeing that happen. If you look at the Saudi-Turkish tightening of relations in recent days, that there is that recognition that, on long term, these are the players.
Yeah. The recent announcement, I don't even know if it's serious. Riyadh announces that they've entered into this agreement with Pakistan, that Pakistan will supposedly extend their nuclear umbrella to protect Saudi Arabia. Is that a real, sustainable geopolitical move? Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have always been very close. In fact, many of the Saudi armed forces, people don't realize, are a lot of Pakistanis. Or is this just for show? Is this, Saudi Arabia trying to get some leverage in the ongoing shift in the region?
Well, one doesn't contradict the other.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
So no, I look. First of all, I think it's real in the sense that there's a long-standing military relationship between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
There's also another factor that many people don't recognize, and that's the way Pakistan identifies itself.
Okay.
It identifies itself in many ways as Saudi Arabia without the holy cities.
Yeah.
It is a state that was established for Muslims.
Yeah.
In a way that many other Muslim states were not established.
Yeah.
In that way. And therefore its affinity with Saudi Arabia and its connection to Saudi Arabia goes far beyond the norms of or what defines international relations.
Yeah.
On top of that, you have a long-standing military relationship. Pakistani pilots were flying Saudi jets.
Yeah.
They were training the Saudi military.
Yeah.
You had at times up to 10,000 Pakistani troops in Saudi Arabia, and Pakistani military wanted to go there because it earned a lot more money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's real in that sense.
And is this to balance against?
I wouldn't.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No worries. I wouldn't just dismiss this relationship.
Yes, that was my theory.
Leave aside, all the speculation that there has been about Saudi involvement in the nuclear, in Pakistan's nuclear development. So I think that's true. I mean, the Saudis don't necessarily, again, the Saudis, in some ways, like the Iranians, frankly, want a nuclear option.
Yeah.
That is to say, they're not trying to build a nuclear weapon, but they want to put building blocks in place. So if Iran were to, and Mohammed bin Salman's been very clear about that, if Iran were to become a nuclear power, they presumably, like the Turks and potentially the Egyptians, would feel that they have no choice but to also become nuclear powers.
Yeah.
So this is one way of leverage or trying to sit on two chairs at the same time, if you wish.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, I think, look, again, more broadly, Saudi Arabia under Mohammed bin Salman, and you see that playing out in the evolution of and deterioration in relations between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Saudi Arabia wants to be the big, the elephant in the room.
Yeah. On
anything and everything.
Yeah.
It wants to be the hub.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it has to compensate for the fact that its military hasn't performed.
Correct.
Yeah, they've spent a lot in buying whatever, but they haven't performed, particularly not in Yemen, not in 2014, or whenever it was when they had the ground confrontation with the Houthis. And not since they intervened in Yemen in 2015.
Yeah, and you're seeing now, so you're seeing that side of the Middle East doing its thing, and then you're seeing the Turks entering in more forcefully. Is this going to be a new, because Michael Rubin and a lot of these Israeli commentators are freaking out about Turkey. Is this a real threat to Israel? Is this a more permanent, a new status quo being created where Turkey is now having a much greater involvement? Or is this just like a temporary, situation?
Look, again, I think there's a lot of information war.
Absolutely.
Pushing it, ideology. Erdogan, first, there's several things. First of all, when, and I lived in Turkey.
Okay.
In fact, it's the country I've lived longest in my life.
Amazing.
When Erdogan was mayor, he maintained close relations with Israel.
Yes. I know
his head of his, one crucial player in this was the cultural attaché at the Israeli consulate in Istanbul at the time, who was a very vivacious Israeli woman of Turkish origin, who had worked for the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra, if I'm not incorrect, before she was posted to Turkey.
Interesting.
And who was a party member, the head of the cultural division of the Istanbul municipality, and they maintained very close relations with Israel. In fact, I was asked at one point by the European Union. They were trying to put a network together of divided cities.
Yeah.
And they desperately needed a Muslim city. And so they wanted the Turks. And they asked me to sound Erdogan out on this. And so I went to see Erdogan. and he cut through the baloney and said, "This is about Jerusalem."
Interesting.
And I said, "Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, this is about Jerusalem." And he said, "I'm in."
Interesting.
So that's one thing. Turkey was, if not the first Muslim state, one of the very first Muslim states to ever recognize Israel.
Yes.
And this is going back to the late 1940s. So there's been a long-standing
so a lot of this is InfoWar.
And there was a lot of within the when as Erdogan became starker in his comments and things that he said, there was a lot of debate and challenging of that within the Justice and Development Party, Erdogan's ruling party. Mm-hmm. So it's much more complex than that. I think Erdogan generally feels very strongly about Palestine.
Yes.
And very strongly about what's happening in Gaza. And of course, you had the Ma'mar Mavi incident, which was the boat by activists that was trying in 2010 that was trying to break the blockade of Gaza, and in which 9 people were killed, including Turkish nationals, on board. And you had, the Israelis were particularly arrogant about this.
Yes.
There was one meeting, if I recall, between, I think it was the deputy foreign minister, whose name I now forget, Israeli foreign minister, and the Turkish ambassador, in which the minister sat on a high chair and the Turkish ambassador was forced to sit on a lower chair. I mean, things like that.
It's also petty.
But you also have genuine differences when it comes to the Kurds.
Yes.
And when it comes to Syria.
Yes.
I mean, if you could argue that, and that's relevant to what could or could not happen in Iran if there were a military intervention. Mm-hmm. I think Israeli military doctrine has changed after October 7, the Hamas attack in 2023. Okay. So before that, the strategy was deterrence.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was deterrence by military superiority. It was deterrence by if you point my finger at you, I'm going to use a sledgehammer to point back. Mm-hmm. What we've
also
seen,
paying off Hamas. They were also paying as part of the.
There's also that.
Yeah.
But what you've seen since October 7, certainly with Lebanon and even more so with Syria, mm-hmm. is that's Iran, and that's where you get the alignment with the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
For different reasons, but in practice pursuing similar policies, which is you want weak central states.
Yes.
And in terms of Israeli doctrine, it was designed to militarily emasculate your neighbors.
Yeah.
Whether that's southern Lebanon, whether that's southern Syria. And so there you have genuine differences between Israel and Turkey.
Yeah.
Syria being a crucial national interest to both, with very different views of what Syria should be.
Yeah. Well, and of course, Turkey is propping up Jelani and his group. And it's very interesting to see that play out, because I thought that the Israelis would be opposed to that, but they seem to be, if not okay with it, they're living with it.
No, I think they are opposed. Well, I think they are opposed to it.
Really?
I mean, first of all, they do not trust Giuliani.
Well, nobody should trust
or Ahmed al-Shara.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
sorry. Yeah,
the Syrian president, because of his history.
Yeah.
and they share with the UAE that obsession with political Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, and they've been clear about it that they don't trust him. I think the security arrangements and the negotiations that the United States has been fostering are Israel's in that because the United States isn't giving it a choice on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they want to see a decentralized Syria. They've been very supportive of the on the ground of the Druze in the south.
Yes. Yeah.
They've intervened militarily on their behalf. They've projected themselves as the protector of ethnic and religious minorities in Syria across the board. They've called the Syrian Kurds, I mean, Gideon Sa'ar, the Israeli foreign minister, described the Kurds in Syria as Israel's natural ally.
Yeah.
You had a conference, now most of those were exiles, but nonetheless, a conference in Tel Aviv, I think it was, in the last 2 months, in which all the minorities, the Druze, the Turkmens,
Yeah.
whoever, the Alawites, were represented, and Israel was their protector.
Yeah.
Whereas Turkey wants a unified state. It wants a centralized state.
They're also trying to pull the oil. They're trying to get that oil pipelines through.
Sure.
Yeah.
But so it's a very different vision of Syria.
Yeah. And that's a potential flashpoint then between Turkey and Israel.
It's a potential flashpoint.
It's very interesting.
And interestingly enough, and I mean, this is an overstatement, if you wish, but in fact, Trump has come down on the side of the Turks and the Syrians.
I've noticed that. And
if it's 1 or 2 visits ago, not the last visit, but I forget which one it is, that Netanyahu paid to Trump in the last year.
Yeah.
Trump, in these news conferences that he holds when he has foreign guests,
yes,
said, "Oh, if you have a problem with Erdogan, let me know. He's a close friend of mine.
Yeah.
I'll solve it for you."
I remember that. I also remember he
and of course, there's the dropping of the support for these Syrian Democratic Forces, the predominantly Kurdish force, that the U.S. supported for the longest period of time.
Them. Yeah.
And the pressure that the United States has exerted on the SDF to fall into line with Ahmed Shara.
Yeah.
There's been, the wholehearted support for Ahmed al-Shara by Trump and by the administration. So for all practical matters, the administration has come down on the side of Turkey rather than on the side of Israel in this.
Very interesting. It's very interesting. So our last question. The Middle East has been, I think, taken up way too much bandwidth of America's time. It looks like the region is going through a once in a generation change. Does this end with a diminishing of American influence and presence in the region, or is America doomed to be eternally involved on a very large level with the Middle East?
Look, well, first of all, I mean, sure, it's taken up a lot of bandwidth. It's in part taken up a lot of bandwidth, not because of the Middle East, but because of problematic U.S. policy.
Oh, I agree. I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not just simply that this is this volatile region, that's hard, you can't control, and that, we'll do anything to be on the front page no matter what. It's more complex than that. Yeah. But having said that, let's face it. First of all, historically, no country, I mean, that's changed with Gaza, and I realize that. but historically, no country has had the kind of grassroots base in the United States that Israel had.
Yes.
If any, it had a popular base, not because of the Jewish community, but because of the evangelist community.
Yeah.
That is unrivaled.
Yeah.
No other state, no matter what lobby they have in Washington, had that kind of access. So, by definition, the United States needed to pay attention. On top of that, you have the crucial waterways.
Yeah.
You have the significance of a country like Saudi Arabia to the Muslim world, or for that matter, Iran, when it comes to the Shiites. So I don't think that you can downplay the importance of it. And of course, you had something else, which was that the Americans historically, until today, even more so, opted for stability rather than democratic development in the region. And so you were supporting regimes that clearly in 2011 proved to be unpopular.
Yeah.
And,
to be fair, though, we did support the Islamists in a lot of the Arab Springs. We were.
I think that's going too far. Okay. I don't think.
Okay.
No, I think that's going too far.
Okay.
First of all, let's take Egypt. The Brotherhood came into this late.
Yeah. They
were very hesitant in the beginning when they looked at it.
Yeah.
And the Obama administration, Obama indeed was supportive not of when Mohammed Morsi won the election, after they said they weren't going to put a candidate and so on and so forth. He wanted the democratic transition, not so much because they were Islamists, but because he wanted the democratic transition.
Okay.
And so I think it's more complex than that.
Okay.
Look, I think the question of let's face it, the question of U.S. influence is really decided in Washington.
Yes. Yeah.
Not in the region.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, China is the largest trading partner.
I know. Yep.
And that's true not only for the Middle East. That's true for much of the world.
Yep. Yep.
And so clearly, Middle Eastern states, particularly the Gulf states, but also Egypt and others, have an interest in diversifying their relationships.
Yeah.
But if you look at, militarily, there's only one address.
Yeah.
And sure, you can buy some Chinese jets, you can buy some French jets, this, that, the other. At the end of the day, the militaries, the regional militaries are built on the U.S.
Yeah.
Look at investment in artificial intelligence.
Oh, that was huge.
And sure, the Emiratis are going to pay both sides against the middle.
Absolutely.
And whatever. But the core of their ambitions and fulfillment of their ambitions is with the U.S.
Yeah.
It's not with China or whoever else, potentially. Yeah. So U.S. bases are still there. Nobody's calling for them to go. On the contrary.
Well, some Americans are. Some Americans.
No, I'm talking in the region. I'm talking about the region.
Yeah.
So the United States has the building blocks.
Yeah.
For being a first among equals, if not more than that. It's wasting it in a lot of ways. Go back to 2019 when whether the Iranians or the Houthis attacked the Saudi oil facilities.
Yeah, Abqaiq.
And go back to Trump's response. Trump's response was, not our business.
Ah,
You want us to intervene? You can pay us.
I remember that. Yeah.
That's not a reliable partner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to be fair, there was, up until then, a lot of confusion of what the Carter Doctrine meant.
Mm-hmm.
So the Carter Doctrine essentially was, post-revolution in Iran, was that the United States would intervene in the region in support of the Gulf states,
right,
if there was an external threat.
Mm.
An external was defined as Soviet.
Right.
Over time, that doctrine was reinterpreted.
Yes.
And the Gulf states understood it as also including potentially against Iran, which was a regional rather than an external threat.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And the U.S. never clarified that.
Purposely, I think.
Yeah. They left it nebulous.
Yeah.
And so leave aside all the perceptions of the relationship with Israel, which frankly the Arabs have learned to work with, essentially. And now all the rhetoric that comes out of the U.S. and the bullying that's going on and so on makes the U.S. a less reliable partner.
Interesting.
And therefore there's less influence.
Yeah.
But that's to me a making of U.S. policy.
Yeah.
Rather than U.S. influence by definition and inevitably has to reduce, not in the long term, but in the short and middle term.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's very interesting. Ever since the Iraq War, I always thought it would be better if we took a step back from the region, and stopped being so meddlesome.
Yeah, but look, I think there are two things. One is that I don't think it's a step back, but there are lots of things that you can do if you don't look through everything through a narrow security prism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And think that your military is your prime foreign policy tool.
Right. I agree.
So it's I don't think it's an issue of taking a step back.
Okay.
As much as it is of recalibrating and rethinking.
Interesting. And on that note, I think that's a good place to end this. I know we went a little long, but this was really fascinating.
That's fine.
And I really want to have you back. I'd love to just kind of talk about your experiences next time we have you on, living in, Turkey, Iran, revolutionary Iran, and, what it was like.
I've lived actually across the Middle East.
That's phenomenal. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I've lived in Turkey. I've lived in Egypt. I've lived in the UAE. I've lived in Saudi Arabia. I've lived in Iran. I've lived in Israel.
Wow.
I've lived in Lebanon.
Wow.
I've lived in Greece. I've lived in Cyprus.
Yeah. So you're a true expert of.
Well, I've covered other parts of the world too.
Well, I know, but this is, yeah. Well, we're going to have to see how it plays out over the coming week. I was told January 15th, I was told Trump was ready to pull the trigger on Iran, and then he was talked out of it by the Arabs. Then last weekend, I was told he was about to go in, and he was talked out of it again by MBS, as well as apparently the U.S. military, the generals and the admirals, are behind the scenes completely opposed to striking Iran. And so Trump is, he's getting a lot of inputs from people that, we'll see what happens with Trump. Who knows? It's a crapshoot. I mean, he could, I don't know what he's going to do.
I think there's several factors, coming back to the very beginning of this conversation. Yeah. the problem, I think Trump has not acted, one, because he doesn't really want a military configuration. Two, he wasn't given options.
I agree.
That would have helped him fulfill his goal as he defined it.
Yep.
And that carried enormous risks with them.
Yep.
Because, in Venezuela, he could go in and out. Even if it's a one-time strike, the Iranians will respond.
Absolutely.
And he may not feel that then he can say, okay, you've responded, this is over.
Yes. And
so the risks were serious. And on top of that, everybody in the region, with only one exception, that being Israel, does not want to see a military conflagration.
Yep.
Of any kind.
The American people don't want to see it.
And Americans don't want it.
Yeah.
So I think there were multiple factors why he was considering acting, and then then decided that he didn't have the options or the support that he needed for that.
Yeah, it isn't Venezuela, that's for sure. And with that, I am Brandon Weichert. You can follow me at We the Brandon. Please do not forget to go to our Rumble page at NatSec Talk. Like, follow, subscribe. Also check me out every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on iHeartRadio, AmericaOutloud.news. I host the Wednesday night show, National Security Hour. James is a regular guest on that radio program, The Monday Show, with my buddies Colonel Mike and Dr. Mike Scheuer. Dr. Mike Scheuer's episode will be dropping very soon. I've been editing it. We went very long with him, which is why it's taken me a little bit longer to get that piece together. And is there any social media you want anybody to follow you on, James? Or is there any?
Well, I'd love it if people would subscribe to my Substack column, which is called The Turbulent World with James M. Dorsey.
Okay.
There's a free subscription. I would love it even more if people take out a paid subscription, because that's what allows me to continue a column that I've had for the last 15 years.
That's phenomenal. Well, and he is, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, really an interesting mind, and his insights are, I think, need to be out there, and everybody needs to be listening, because there is not many reasonable, informed opinions and takes on the Middle East these days. It's a lot of ideological claptrap, but James has got the right stuff. Thank you so much for giving me your time, and we'll have you back. This is the National Security Talk. I'm Brandon Weichert. Bye-bye.